probably would run about 35 minutes, and I don't quite have that, so I'm gonna speed this talk up a little bit. This is probably a unique discussion here than most are speaking about. Mine is a strange journey to become someone in psychedelic treatment and community space the way it happened for me. And you know, although there's a lot of positive energy and perspectives on psychedelics, I actually have both sides of the psychedelic experience, including the very negative. And so I'm here to talk about skill development is really my perspective on what psychedelics should be about, and not just psychedelics, all mind-altering substances in general. I think our society has had the wrong perspective on substances, especially since the beginning of prohibitions and the war on drugs. So starting out with kind of how I arrived here, I was growing up in a household that was, for lack of a better way of putting it, an intellectually atheistic household. My parents really only valued going to work, getting the degree, creating a good job opportunity career for you know, the future, and no spiritual kind of fulfillment in the household. My father had a dark secret he had hidden from the family. He was in the Italian mafia, at least at some affiliate level, and then became a math professor. So really odd combination there, and hid that. I didn't know that until after he had passed away. And so because of growing up in a very violent place in San Bernardino and being exposed to drugs at a young age and a good bit of violence, I was interested in martial arts. And my original martial arts teacher, I found out, was involved with psychedelics, especially LSD and psilocybin. And his perspective was that there were mindsets that could contribute to flow states that would put you in a more competent ability to perform martial arts or in a self-defense or combat setting. So that was my interest at the time because I was dealing with a lot of violence. And I found out he was using psychedelics, and I decided I wanted to try it because that was kind of a hidden thing. He was doing meditation, but it was like under the surface. So I tried LSD for the first time. First 2 times were pretty mundane. By the 3rd time, I took 3 blotter hits of something that was dosed, who knows how strong it was dosed at, this was the 90s, and had a profound experience of Christ consciousness, was not paying attention to set and setting, knew nothing about psychedelics, was dropped off at a kegger party, as this is just like outside of high school, and was left with a very jarring experience, and then went to my home, where I experienced something similar to the Albert Hoffman bicycle day scenario, where there were demons and devils, and felt like I was in hell, and this all had to do with my home life, which I didn't understand. And so that was my initiation. You would think perhaps that I might not go back after that experience, but maybe like Albert himself, I just felt a call there. I knew there was something deeper there, especially after experiencing that, for lack of a better way of putting it, that Christ consciousness experience, where I felt a presence that is very deeply personal to me and hard to explain. So from there I continued on, but as I continued on with the toxicity at home, without the proper guidance, without mentorship, without understanding of the true usage of psychedelics with skill development in mind, we were 90s kids going to raves and doing large dosages, on average 500 to 800 micrograms, and it began to climb from there. And eventually, with my father pre-diagnosed with colon cancer and showing signs of illness, and the angry and dysfunctional relationship we had at home, I took these enormous heroic amounts of LSD and then psilocybin. In 1999, in June, I think somewhere around the solstice, June 21st, I took probably approaching 9,000 micrograms of LSD. Had a life-changing experience, very frightening experience. A lot of things that I'm not going to make this a trip story. It's just, these were enormously impactful and frightening, earth-shattering experiences. 6 months later, on Millennium New Year's, I ended up eating, this was after my father's diagnosis, I ended up eating 28 grams of psilocybin and approximately, I think in the neighborhood of 3,000 to 4,500 micrograms of LSD. Earth-shattering experience, and then my father's diagnosis continued to go downhill. Eventually, he was on the last days of his life and suffering enormously and grappling with his lack of faith and what was coming next with his death. And I experienced my first true mental health, extreme mental health challenges: panic attacks, deep depression, inability to even go to work. I was in a math program at the time, following my father's footsteps, pursuing a PhD. Couldn't even go to school anymore. then was introduced to Western psychiatric medicine, and with terrible results. And along the way, I had friends die as a indirect result, or almost even a direct result, of improper psychedelic usage. So I had a friend die at 21 years old on Mother's Day due to a psychotic episode on LSD that then led to him being placed on psychiatric medications, strong mood stabilizers like lithium, and then Prozac, and then a whole smorgasbord of psychiatric medications which he did not take appropriately, starting, stopping, had a heart attack at 21 years old. Another friend experienced a similar situation, was prescribed antipsychotics, Seroquel, and a number of other medications, ended up shooting himself in the head. And then, to top it all off, my original martial arts instructor that I looked up to committed suicide in 1998. And that was a little earlier, so I'm kind of backtracking. So there was all of this carnage that was happening around psychedelic usage and no understanding of what we were doing. And I had enormously positive spiritual experiences and then also very ill-advised negative experiences. And it gave me a well-rounded base, really, to achieve what I achieved later in life. But it took, at that point in 2002, my father passed away. It took an additional 12 years of me being lost. I was in, I moved out of the mathematics career that I was in and joined the prohibition markets of cannabis. And it was a very violent marketplace that I was in. I was in a hostage situation in 2007. I was in several armed robbery scenarios in which I was very lucky to survive. And it began to create an entire, it was my whole history and set. And then in around 2008, I met one of the great loves of my life, and we spent 6 years together traveling the world, but she was very damaged herself. And so, mental health was constantly a theme throughout my life, whether I was engaging with psychedelics or not engaging with psychedelics. And at this time in my life, post my father's death, I had discontinued, for the most part, most of my interactions with psychedelics. And so for many years, most of that 12-year period, I was not engaging with psychedelics. And I actually consider it to be the time period of my life where I was the most lost. I was pursuing money, I was partying with friends, I was over drinking, I was doing a lot of things that weren't leading to any real interpersonal growth. And then in 2014, Nicole passed away tragically from a sudden drug overdose. And she had a binge drug addiction cycle that had to do with the murder of her first love, and it's this ripple effect that then is affecting lives to this day. And I've decided to turn that ripple effect from going the way that it was headed that way, leading to more carnage, more destruction, maybe my own overdose, maybe my own suicide, to something that has begun to help others, and obviously has changed my own life. And in learning that, I've discovered that psychedelics are an amazing vehicle. They're an amazing tool, but I've come across something that I call the 8 root fundamentals of mental, emotional, spiritual skill development and healing. And I learned that because I've been a martial arts in my whole life. A martial artist from those early times up to even the present day. And I met a mentor who was the best teacher of my life, better than any of the mathematics teachers, any of the academic teachers I've ever met. This man is able to categorize knowledge in a way that is very consumable and absorbable. And he does it through considering what he calls root fundamentals. In mathematics, starting out as a young child, you start with counting. Just 1, 2, 3, then you simple addition, arithmetic, and you move on from there, right? With learning a language, you start with the basic alphabet, you move from there. With any skill, you should start with these fundamentals. And I didn't start that way with martial arts, actually. And then meeting this person explained to me what the fundamentals of martial arts are, which is BDAT, balance, distance, angle, timing. And distance is really the main kind of taproot of that whole thing. And so I began to look at the world this way and try to figure that out with mental health. What are the roots? What's going on? I don't hear people often speak in this way about it. And I find it, at least for myself, very helpful. And I discovered that the first root fundamental was exposing and processing past trauma. And there's a lot of different ways that people do that. I find that the typical, just direct talk kind of cognitive therapy where, hey, tell me what your problems are, tell me what's going on with you, is great for cognitive frameworks and dealing with belief systems that might be harming someone, limiting beliefs and things like that. Not that great at truly bringing up and out the stored trauma and processing and bringing it out in a way that actually leads to internal healing on that level. Especially now with the understanding that trauma is really in the body, it's really stored in us, in our cellular structures. And so I do a type of therapy that I just call journey work, but now after being in this space a while, I see that a lot of people use that term. It really what it is it's a combination of guided meditation, a bit of hypnotherapy, and gestalt therapy kind of wrapped up in one. And through that discovery, I began to mix that type of therapy modality with the usage of psychedelics, and it was like synergy. It was amazing, the peanut butter and jelly effect that I got from that. And that was the turning point where I really started to notice, okay, I'm changing. I'm facing fears. I'm coming to grips with who my father really was. All the denial. I'm covering things very quickly right now, guys, because I just don't have enough time. So there's a lot of modalities and ways. There's EMDR, there's IFS, there's so many, and maybe some of you guys probably have so many other modalities out there that you use to process past trauma, and it's a lifelong journey. The second one fundamental is something I call not doing. Other people might refer to it as meditation, and I don't refer to it as meditation because I feel like that entails an idea that I'm doing something. When I watch animals just lay down and just lay there. They're not meditating, they're just being. And that is such an important aspect in mental health that is, I don't think it's promoted enough. And I like the statement that Paul Stamets made about someone asking him, how should I prepare for a macrodose psilocybin trip? And he said, go to the forest, don't bring any food, don't bring any books, don't bring your electronics, bring some water and sit there for 3 days fasting with no stimulus. And if you can do that, you're ready for the macro. And I think that's a really fairly accurate statement, how important not doing is and how much of our lives, especially in this technologically advanced society, we're just doing. Some people think, not doing anything is sitting in front of a screen, and that is just not the case. At the highest levels of not doing is an attempt at even stopping thinking, which is probably the hardest and most difficult level of that not doing practice. And obviously some of the, more skilled practitioners in the meditation area are probably able to achieve that and achieve it quite quickly. The third root fundamental is, and what you're going to notice is these are linked too. So I mentioned that if you spend enough time not doing, if you watch people who have a good bit of unprocessed trauma, they have a lot of difficulty sitting and not doing anything. They either disassociate or they're constantly consuming, distracting, doing all these things. So if they were to sit still long enough, that trauma is going to come up, and that's what they're avoiding. And so being a facilitator, being someone who's there to guide and help and support, you have to explain to them, hey, I need you to kind of go into this pain a little bit and sit still for a while. In the third root fundamental of connecting with nature, we start to see there's a link there as well. If you observe nature enough, you might start to find that there's a strange flow to nature in that it appears that there's more not doing than doing within nature. There's a good bit of not doing. And we as Homo sapiens and humans on this planet, we seem to be doing a whole lot of the opposite of that. So we're at odds with the nature's natural flow of how much time you're doing something. And along with that comes death. Nature makes you very aware of death if you spend enough time in it. And death is something we sweep under the rug in the West here, and I think that's a huge mistake. Some of the practitioners here might even call themselves death doulas. I don't know how many people may be in here in the whole convention that are part of this, but I know being the founder of Psychedelic and the platform that we've created, that we have a number of people signed up and categorized some of what they do as being a death doula. And I think that's extremely important. I was watching my father die without having any support or any understanding of how to go through that process was so damaging. And it was damaging to me as a child even, and we shield our children from death. We shield our children sometimes too much. Death is a part of life, and we're going to be facing it at some point. And it's a skill to face death. It's a skill to expose past trauma. It's a skill to not do and sit still, especially in a toxic world that's constantly encouraging you to do. It's a skill, and skills are what liberate us. I feel that the core of love is liberation, and so to love myself is to gain skills to help myself be more free, and to show love to someone else, in my perspective, is to help them gain skills that then promotes their liberation. And so all of these are skills. Huge, almost all of life from my perspective now is skill and skill development. The fourth root fundamental is the trickiest, and it's by accident that it ends up number 4, right smack in the middle, because it's taking an inventory of your beliefs, really reviewing why you believe what you believe. Negative thoughts come in and out of our heads all of the time for all of us, probably even the most enlightened or the most emotionally stable. The difference isn't the thought. The difference is the anchor, and what the anchor is belief. What do I believe? When my girlfriend died, I had 2 competing thoughts. I'll see her again, I'll never see her again. When I would think I'll never see her again, I would be in a very dark place, in some situation, probably cooped up in my room with the curtains drawn, sitting there isolating, and I would go into that negative state. When I was in the ocean surfing, when I was outdoors connecting, when I had great friends around me who were supporting me, I would think, you know, I'm going to see her again. You know, and I began to question, what do I believe about this world? What do I believe about the universe? What do I believe about death and its meaning in our lives and its permanence? And eventually I decided to choose to believe that I will see her again, and that was an enormous turning point. Had I chosen, and I realized these were two competing thoughts, had I chosen that I will never see her again, ever, I promise you I wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't be helping others. I'd probably be very selfish. Who knows, I'd be still alive, I don't know. I might be addicted to something. There could be all types of things from that one belief that could have changed the course of everything. And beliefs are at individual levels and collective levels. Beliefs are affecting our political structures. They're affecting our personal lives. They're affecting our social lives. They're affecting our sexual lives. They're affecting our relationships with substances, entheogens, and the entire gamut of substances. Everything is almost a relationship, really, if you think about it. And so it's so important to address our beliefs. And I have one simple guiding tool. Don't choose beliefs that harm you. Don't choose beliefs that harm other people. That may sound simple. Turns out it's actually far more complicated when you start going down that rabbit hole. Moving on to 5. 5 is relationships. We're a social being. In all of the people that I treat, in all of the veterans that I work with, and all the people I've facilitated for, every one of them that's come to me with real mental health challenges has always felt isolated on some level. Always felt like they're having difficulty in their relationships. It's a skill. Relationships are a skill. Many of us who grew up in certain ways in certain households maybe felt isolated in our younger lives in school and places like that. We haven't maybe gotten that development, that skill development in social building, in building relationships, in maintaining relationships, in repairing relationships. There's actually 5 steps to relationship repair. It's very concise how this is addressed when you really start to break things down. And those 5 steps I can go into later, I just don't have time right now. But there's a lot of reasons why when people go through the apology phase and kind of rekindle the relationship, a lot of times we'll see recurring cycles because they don't follow these steps all the way to the end. The 6th root fundamental is diet, exercise, and breath work. I almost made breath work a 9th fundamental, but I saw them as kind of linked together. And this is the difference too, actually, I've realized with the diet portion. That actually is the difference between a macrodose on psychedelics and a microdose. Microdosing, I would say, actually fits into more of the diet section of the supplementing and healthy, giving health to your neurons in your brain. And where we start to get into more of the larger belief side of things and addressing the skills necessary to face a macrodose, then that's the other side of it. I don't think that's necessarily the dietary side. And then, of course, exercise is important. And breath work. Breath work saved my life. And in fact, breath work was the first root fundamental I was exposed to when my father died. When my father died, I was actually suicidal in part because of the Western psychiatric industry had promoted all of the pharmaceutical cornucopia of drugs to me, and then told me I was brain damaged from my psychedelic usage. At the time, we were in a stigmatized, very stigmatized time, and they said, well, you're brain damaged from all this LSD and psilocybin and stuff you did to yourself, and so you need Seroquel, you need, Paxil, you need these things, and thank God, I think the LSD changed something within me, because when I took those drugs, I went, whoa, I don't like how that feels, even within one day. Of Paxil, I was like, this is not for me. There's something not right with this. And so I ended up finding someone who was a Qigong practitioner and was able to study under him, and it saved my life. Even though I was on a crazy path, even though I was not on a spiritual path, even though I had a psychedelic history, went from a psychedelic history to a completely hedonistic, materialistic mindset, which is so strange. In some ways, not making comparison, no egoic involvement here, but in some ways it's similar to the Siddhartha story. I went from kind of an enlightened phase of my life into a completely dark phase of my life to a reemergence back into spirituality and spiritual and emotional growth through the death of my girlfriend. That was the resurgence. So having had the experience with Western medicine and that stigmatization, wow, what a frightening experience that was. And then finding breath work and just that one thing, just daily breath work changed my life at such a level. And it's hard for me to convince people to come to me for facilitation and treatment to do the breath work every day. They hear me and I show them the movements, I show them the breath, and then I see them the next time, like, have you been doing breath work? Well, I decided to eat a marijuana gummy instead. I went to bed and I played some videos. I'm like, come on, man, you got to do the breath work. Listen to me, it works, and it's cumulative. The more you do it, the more often you do it, wow, what a powerful thing. The 7th root fundamental is something that almost goes completely counter to our entire Western civilization, and that is embracing discomfort. It's very difficult to get people to embrace discomfort, but to go through all of the previous and prior root fundamentals that I've been expressing to you, you need to embrace a bit of discomfort. If you're going to process and expose past trauma, you're going to be uncomfortable. If you're going to sit still and you're not used to it, and you're in a world where you're used to screen time and all that stuff, you're going to be uncomfortable. If you're going to expose yourself to nature and you've been living in New York City or in downtown Chicago your whole life, you're going to be a bit, uncomfortable. You go through exposing your beliefs and what you believe around all kinds of possibly uncomfortable topics like sexuality and proper substance use and all those things, and even politics and environmental issues. You might get uncomfortable if you really take an authentic look at that stuff. Relationships, you go through some awkwardness, some uncomfortable moments. You sit in it. If you sit in that awkwardness a bit, sometimes you'll find that you hit that next level frequency with that person. If you're able to sit through that moment of unpleasantness, wow, what amazing door can open up. So embracing discomfort is really important, pivotal and key thing to, skill to embrace. And it is a skill. Some people can expose themselves to enormous amounts of discomfort and others can't. And it's a skill. Strength is a skill. Facing fear is a skill. Facing death is a skill. Almost everything is a skill. And so the facing of discomfort means you need to put yourself through some things you're uncomfortable with, and do it fairly often, not to the point where you're causing trauma to yourself, not to that degree. There's a lot of grace here, finding your threshold, exposing yourself to it. And the same thing is going to the gym. So you go to the gym, you lift a certain weight for a certain period of time, you're ready to move up, maybe 2.5 pounds, maybe that's all it is. You can do that with discomfort. It's the same thing. And the 8th root fundamental, this is the most interesting one. And this one can get rather, it depends on definitions. This gets into a world of definitions. I call the 8th root fundamental mitigation of ego. The problem is the word ego has a very faceted definition and means different things to different people. Some people feel ego is something that is necessary in order to exist and differentiate one's personal self from the world around us, and therefore survive and feed ourselves and operate. And that's a fair enough definition. I'm going to add some other words here: hubris, self-importance, those aspects. But it's also misleading because someone who's very arrogant may have a large ego, but someone who's very, very shy and unable to come out of their shell is also can be ruled by an internal ego and identity. And this particular part of ourselves is causing an enormous amount of suffering. And I see a linkage to it in almost every mental health challenge that might be listed in, say, the DSM, which I'm not qualified to really speak on because I'm not a qualified psychotherapist and haven't studied that. But when I see different disorders and problems with people, I see this particular part of someone. We could call it a conglomerate of neural pathways that are triggered by certain stimuli, or we can look at it from a metaphysical standpoint. Because of my deep history with psychedelics and even my introduction to meeting entheogenic deities in some of those extreme experiences, I tend more towards a metaphysical explanation, but I don't maintain that way of speaking about it because sometimes I'm speaking with people who are maybe atheistically or agnostically leaning or extremely scientifically minded and they don't want to hear about all that stuff. So we can talk about it from the perspective of a conglomeration of neural pathways that leads to a perspective of never in the present moment, always in the past, always in the future, always in a state of comparison. And in that state of materialistic perspective as well, you're just in a state of suffering pretty much all the time, or at least dissatisfaction. You just never really find that moment of true inner peace and connection that we're all, I think, seeking on some level. And that, to me, is this enormous stumbling block towards even the psychedelic experience, towards the relationship maintenance, towards our political and environmental structures. At a global scale, what is happening with conflicts amongst human beings. And I think it can boil down to this one thing. We are seeing ourselves as separate. We don't see ourselves like an ant colony, which is one moving in unison, hive being that is all part of itself. We see each other as others. We hold on to this specific and personally unique identity. And uniqueness is great, but in this mindset, it becomes this idea that I'm unique, I'm isolated, I'm different from you, I don't like your difference, you don't like my difference. We're going to now end up in some sort of conflict, disharmony, or just isolation and sadness because now we feel disconnected. I have an even larger belief around this that has to do with potentially consciousness as a whole and where we're headed as a species. I don't think you can really legislate at the highest levels and enforce at the highest levels to change the environmental degradation we're seeing on this planet and the things that are happening. I don't think that it truly will work in the end. I think you can make efforts and you'll make impacts in places. But for us to make it over this real serious stumbling block, we need to all evolve consciously to a point where we no longer see each other as conflict sources that we need to have an enemy experience with, or a judgment to such a degree where even violence is a possibility, or the enormous political strife that we're seeing is wrapped up in these identities. And I think that may hold us back from achieving something at the highest level, potentially in the next, I don't know, what would it take, 1,000 years, maybe less, becoming an interstellar species. I don't believe we can make it there if we stay under the current mentality that I believe is really ruled by ego, and then try to somehow navigate that through, legal means of legislation and enforcement. And then wars, and then the economic structures that are here. That I don't believe if we were ever to achieve that highest level of technological advancement, that will even operate from the perspective of a currency and currency exchange. Will be beyond that at that point if we make it. If not, maybe we'll die off and evolve into little green and gray men ourselves, and maybe we'll have brain hardware that somehow gets us a little bit past that evolutionary stumbling block of what I call the ego. So those are 8 root fundamentals. That was a pretty quick scan over it because I'm a little concerned about time. So I'm gonna put it there. Let me look at the time just in case I got some more comments I can make. But I think she said she was gonna come in at 1:15. I think she said I had till 1:20. For now, does anyone have any questions about the 8 root fundamentals and that sort of breakdown? Sure.
Can you give an example of the breathwork that you do?
Would you like to see me actually do it? Or yeah. So in Qigong, there's 3, possibly 4 levels to the Qigong exercise. So if I'm doing something simple, the first thing I'll do is pulling down the heavens, and you've probably seen Shaolin monks and things do that before they do their type of demonstrations. There's going to be the breath work itself, the breathing in and out, and the timing of that. There's going to be the body movement, when I move my body in conjunction with the breath. And then there's going to be the visualization, what I'm visualizing inside of my mind that's in conjunction with the breath work itself. And so in this case, I'm going to do something very simple. It's called pulling down the heavens. And in pulling down the heavens, it's considered to be a grounding exercise. I'm going to visualize the planet as having an energy field itself. And that visualization will be gold. It's a golden color. There's also an energy called heavenly energy. It has nothing to do with less necessarily spiritual energy. It's the energy of the cosmos, the energy of the stars and the galaxies and everything above. And that energy is visualized as very white and ethereal. In this exercise, we're going to mix those 2 energies, and we're going to pull it through the body while we do the breath. So the first part is, I'll show you the body movement. So the first part is I'm going to stand with my feet about shoulder width apart and my hands hanging naturally. And then I'm going to rise my hands up to shoulder width, turn them towards the sky, bring them all the way up to where it's here, and then I'm going to pull down to the crown of my head and all the way down like this. So that's the body movement. The breath part of that body movement in conjunction with that is going to be an inhale all the way up, inhaling, and then exhaling. The visualization part is going to be that if you've seen the meridian lines and the charts on acupuncture walls, acupuncture is actually a subset of Qigong. You see the meridian lines, and they're seen as kind of hoses and conduits of energy, chi energy, right? So in this visualization, your hands and your legs and your whole body are like hoses that are channeling this chi. So what I'm visualizing as I inhale is vacuuming up all this golden earth energy. And then I'm going to visualize vacuuming up all this heavenly energy and combining the 2. And then as I exhale, I'm pushing that energy through the crown of my head, through my entire body, and then visualizing it going straight down into the center of the earth. Why that works, why that visualization is somehow helpful in all this, I can't explain that to you. I really know. We get some quantum physicists up here to maybe talk about if there's any merit in any of that. But I can tell you it's very helpful. So to do the exercise once or twice for you, I'll do it without speaking. So I'll do 3 of them. So usually it's done like this. I start and stop every exercise with that exercise. So that's like an opener and closer. I'll do that if I'm feeling anxiety. I do that if I need to calm down. I'll do that for those reasons. That is called a grounding exercise. But there are also what's called tonification exercises that are more complicated, and I don't have enough time to really go through that. But I'll do that, say, in the morning or early afternoon times. And then there are exercises called purging exercises. And purging exercises are meant to get the jitters out, get the negative energy out, get the stagnation out. And some of those exercises may contain vibrational toning, if you've ever heard that term. So like the famous sound, right? The that's a toning sound that vibrates even the whole head and back of the head to the crown of the head. There are other sounds in Qigong that are tailored specifically to organs, because in Qigong, they believe that energies reside and emotions reside in specific organs. So the lungs can house grief. The heart is your connection, obviously, to people and love and your relationships. The kidneys are fear. The liver is anger. The spleen is regulating everything. And the way they see it is that the liver, when you gather a bunch of anger in the liver, it begins to attack the spleen. I have specific anger exercises that are purging exercises that involve striking like a rice bag or something that can hit with sticks. And if you look at the meridian lines and the way that Qigong looks at it, they believe that the anger comes through the meridian lines up through the back of the head and out this way. So they see anger is coming this way. So when you do an anger exercise, which I would do with, I would need a platform and something to put like a bag of rice on. And you don't ever eat the rice after you're done doing this. But you would stand here and you would strike it, and then you make a no sound. But no is English. It's really O or guo. That's a liver sound, and then a ha sound, and that's the heart sound. Xiang is a lung sound. And so these sounds are meant to vibrate specific organs and dismantle stagnation, right? And that becomes what people believe. That goes back to the fourth root fundamental. What is that doing? How is that accurate? How does acupuncture work? I don't really know, but I know that it's changed my life and it's been enormously helpful. Was that good? Yeah, right on. Does anyone else have any other questions about the root fundamentals or anything else? Oh, sure. Yeah.
First of all, I love your presentation and thank you for being vulnerable. And everyone's dealing with shit, and some people go through majority of their lives without experiencing major traumas, or while other people, it's like they're being bombarded with the worst that you can imagine for anyone, and and to be able to address these big fundamental issues and rooted in coming from a place of love, kindness, compassion, empathy, and the importance of the psychedelics in that. And I'm being in the field, I'm curious to know like what you believe, because we have this underground movement that really took off at the beginning of the pandemic, where people, especially microdosing, people were self-medicating, having success stories, personal growth, sharing, and then, so there's the underground movement, and then there's also, the scientific clinical trials, the FDA, the legislation, and all of that. And I think both are necessary. But I'm a huge fan of the idea of Occam's razor, and just point A to point B. Let's fix this shit quickly. And you look at the degree of big issues that we're dealing with. On the worst end is the nuclear threat, which we've had. Which if you see everything going on in the Middle East now, it's like, hey, that's a potential reality that exists in the future. So if you could wave on, if you were in control of whatever with regard to psychedelics, what do you think? What would be the best avenue that you can that you could foresee?
If I'm interpreting your question, because it seems like you merged a couple of ideas. We got a global.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's okay. We got a global instability, even crisis potential situation that's been present, since the beginning of the military-industrial complex and even before that. And then we've got this idea of psychedelics and how we're going to address mental health at a large scale as well. And I think within that, we've got so many facets and parts to that, right? You've got the legislative issues, you've got perception around that. You've got scientific perspective. You've got a lot of, in some cases, what I'm concerned with is a know-it-all aspect that we have to be very careful with. Sometimes, someone on the scientific side of things will say, this is the way it has to be. And there's a lot of times, some holes in what we really understand. I mean, look what we did with SSRIs and what we did with other medications, right? I don't believe that SSRIs are evil or completely negative, by the way, either. I think there's a tool, for a time, and it should be used sparingly and cautiously. But your question is so big, I don't know that I'll get through it because my time's about up right now. Both are going to be addressed from similar angles in that I think you have to be very careful when you start to rub up against people who disagree with your viewpoint, because what we're talking about is finding a way where we all agree on something and start to make positive changes in the right direction.
In that community.
Yeah.
Because we're all tapped into that.
Exactly. And so we're going to find people that have differing opinions to us. And some of them really negative differing opinions, and some of them maybe not so much, but have very strong feelings about things. And somehow we have to find a cohesive way forward. And that starts to get into what I didn't have time to really talk about, which is back to that ego mitigation and what I believe the Toltec shamans of northern Mexico were absolute masters at. I think we have to be careful with direct resistance to people. It doesn't seem to work very well. Yeah. And we need to be able to listen to others and embrace their ideas and go, yeah, I really like what you're saying. I care for you as a human being. You're very important to me. Let's discuss this further. Tell me more about your ideas and get them. We need to become masters at that. Yeah. That communication interaction here, so that we can become more cohesive in how we address these things at the global conflict and actual country level, but also at this movement level that you're talking about. It's going to come down to how good we are at managing those conflicts and managing that interpersonal back and forth. And I think that's exactly when we start to talk about that ego mitigation and management. And that's a huge topic, so I'm not going to address it now. And I know they're getting ready for the talk. So I got to relinquish the floor now, but yeah.